Welcome everyone to the practical guide to T2 manufacturing. My name is Ulrich and I am from the Red Circle Incorporated, and I will be presenting this material. I'm assuming everyone has the slides. Okay, except anyone who doesn't have the link for the slide. Okay. I'll refer a little bit to some software. Let me just give you the link so you can download it. This is the software I'll be using. It's fairly useful and can calculate lots of nice prices and do all sorts of cool, wonderful stuff. And I refer to it a little bit and give some screenshots. So if anyone was curious, that's the software. Okay. So a little about me. So I started playing Eve about 2 years ago in May 2011, and I actually joined Eve University 2 years ago today. So this is my would have been the second anniversary in the game. So I joined the Threshold project. So those people who were in the public channel, Flay Joe Buxton, he used to run Threshold project. So that was a Class 2 wormhole with a C1 high-sec static that he used to run. And he used to invite all the Unistas, and that's where I first got my taste of having a pass and really started Tech-2 manufacturing. So as I said, I had a pass in wormhole space, so that was in Threshold. You can look up some of the old forum threads and see some of the stuff he did. He's a cool guy, and say hi to him in public if he's there. And like I said, I had my own pass, so I thought, what to do with my pass? So I was running sleeper sites, and then I decided, I'll try doing some Tech-2 invention and manufacturing. I've always been interested in manufacturing, so I tried it, and it was good, and I made some money, and so eventually that got enough volume that I could actually afford to set up my own pass in high-sec. So I actually moved my pass into high-sec, because eventually that's where the majority of my ISK was coming from, T2 invention and manufacturing. So I moved my pass into high-sec, so I had an alt corp, and Ulrich isn't actually my manufacturing character. I have another character that does all my manufacturing. So he rejoined the uni, and I carried on producing T2 stuff for quite a few months. So I produced full-time. That was my main source of income from about April of 2012 until September. There's a lot of work involved in T2 manufacturing, and I just didn't have the time for it anymore, so I decided to give it up, and I actually could afford to plex myself most of the way until January just on the ISK that I had left from my T2 manufacturing and invention. So there is a lot of ISK in it. And yes, thank you, Raphelia, for kindly posting the original Threshold project link. And then I decided, I want to try higher class wormhole. So I decided to join the Red Circle Incorporated on their apprenticeship back in January this year. And then I've been there ever since, and it's great and very fun. Okay, so that's a little bit about me, my history, and what I did. So, as I said, I did a lot of T2 manufacturing for quite a while and made some good ISK doing it. So I'm just going to start off by giving a rough overview of invention and how T2 items are manufactured. So in the game, there's blueprints, and everyone's seen Tech-1 blueprints. So let me just link one. So Meta-Zero items are produced by utilizing Tech-1 blueprints. So you can, I'm assuming everyone's seen a blueprint. Can anyone who hasn't seen a blueprint X up in chat in class.E-UNI? So everyone's seen a blueprint? Okay. I'm assuming you can all still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Just no response. Okay. So Tech-1 items, well, Tech-1 Meta-Zero items are produced by using blueprints. Meta 1, 2, 3, and 4 items are just found, and then you have faction modules and all that, which are another thing entirely, and I won't get into those. So, if you do a show info on the blueprint, then if you look under attributes, you'll see a whole bunch of stuff, and then you'll see under bill of materials, manufacturing. So that's what it costs to build. That's what it costs to build the Tech-1 item. And then under the second tab, you'll notice there's another tab that says invention. And this lists what you need to do the invention. I'll come back to that a little bit later. So the basic idea of the process, which I've laid out on slide 3, basically you make copies of the blueprint that you want to be invented, and then you take those blueprint copies and then you put them through a process called invention. And then you invent a copy of the Tech-2 blueprint using the Tech-1 blueprint copy and some data cores and a couple of other items. And then once you do that invention, that will give you a copy of the Tech-2 blueprint. So using that, you can then manufacture the Tech-2 items. So I'm assuming everyone's encountered Tech-2 items. So here is the item. Bubba asked a question, do ME and PE from T0 original affect the T2 item? The answer is no, they do not. The ME and PE are, I'll get into that later, but the value of the ME and PE of the Tech-2 blueprint copy is based on what kind of decryptors you use. So if you just use the default, it will actually invent a ME-4 and a PE-4 blueprint. Yes. So there is a result. I have a bunch, but not on me. So if you notice, you'll have, that's actually not an invented one, I think. That is actually a Tech-2 blueprint original. If you look in contracts, you can usually find some Tech-2 blueprint copies. Do you always get the same result from invention using the same Tech-1 blueprint? Yes, for most items. There are some items which can be invented into multiple items. The example is, assault frigates. Assault frigates like the Wolf and the Jaguar are both invented from the same blueprint, the Rifter. So they're both Tech-2 versions of the Rifter. So you actually get a little drop-down when you do the invention that chooses whether you want to get a Jaguar or a Wolf from the invention. One moment while I just find a Tech-2 blueprint copy. So here, for example, okay, I can't drag and drop it. So if you look inside this contract, you'll see there's a bunch of Tech-2 blueprints. So these are Tech-2 blueprint copies. So this is actually run with the default, so you'll notice it has material level -4 and productivity level -4, and it has 10 license production runs remaining. Okay. So let's cover the skills needed first of all. So what do you need to get started? So part 1, we need skills. So this is slide number 4. So if you go back to the Tech-1 blueprint and look under Bill of Materials and then under Invention, you'll see that there is a list of skills that you need. So it will list an encryption methods skill. So there are 4 racial encryption method skills, one for each of the factions. So there is Amar, Caldari, Galente, and Minmatar. I think these are usually, the skill books for these are usually found in various exploration sites, so some of you who've been doing exploration might have found some. Okay, so every item pretty much needs one of these encryption method skills, and then it requires 2 other skills. So there's a whole list of what are called the science skills. They're listed, yes, exactly like in Amar encryption methods. If you look at a lot of the armor tanking modules, they will require Amar encryption methods. If you look at guns, it'll depend on the race. So hybrids require Galente encryption methods, missile launchers require Caldari, projectiles require Minmatar, and then lasers require Amar. Okay, so it will require two of the science skills. So we see for the Light Neutron Blaster 1, that requires Mechanical Engineering Level 1, which has prerequisites of Science and Mechanics Level 5, and then Plasma Physics Level 1, which requires Science and Engineering Level 5. So I think most of them require science, and then it'll be either mechanics or engineering. I forget the exact combinations. Okay. Okay. So you'll need, for any particular item, you'll need at least 2 of those skills. For invention, you actually only need them to level 1. So you need encryption methods to level 1, and you'll need the 2 of the science skills to level 1. Also, a very useful skill to have is laboratory operation and advanced laboratory operation, if someone wants to link that. That will enable you to run more simultaneous invention jobs. Okay, so that's all you need for invention. Those are the only skills that you need. Laboratory operation will give you the ability to make more copies. Yes, thank you, Faye. So laboratory operation will allow you to make more copies. It'll allow you to make more, do more invention jobs simultaneously. Okay. So then, once you've invented the blueprints, you need to manufacture those. So again, these need certain skills. So you will need Industry 5. Pretty much every T2 item requires Industry 5 as a minimum. If you go back to our contract, and then you look at the skills, and look under the bill of materials and then the manufacturing, you'll notice it requires, here is the blueprint. So if you look under bill of materials and then manufacturing, you'll notice that it requires Industry Level 5. Notice that it doesn't require the encryption skill to manufacture. It will also require both the same science skills that you had. So if you look at the Tech-1 blueprint, for the invention you needed, it's different skills to build. I thought it was no, I'm looking under the wrong tab. Okay. Yes, you do require different skills to build. I thought it was the same. I don't pay much attention too much sometimes. Okay, so you'll notice that to build the Light Neutron Blaster 2, it requires Plasma Physics 1, which is the same skill you needed to invent, and then it requires a new skill, Quantum Physics. And notice it will also require some items and some extra materials. So, just for people who haven't looked before, it's the same for Tech-1 manufacturing. If you have materials, they are affected by by the ME level of the blueprint. They are also affected by your production efficiency skill. This is why it's highly recommended that you have production efficiency 5, because it will actually reduce the materials. Note that on the Light Neutron Blaster 2, it doesn't make too much of a difference because a lot of the materials are fairly cheap. Like the titanium, it costs about 5 point something per unit, and there's 541, so only about 2,500 in ISK for the titanium. Okay. So now that we know the skills, so again, it's not the same two science skills, sorry about that. But then we will require production efficiency 5 is highly recommended but not necessary. As we saw, it's only some of the cheaper materials that actually required that were actually affected by that skill. Then you'll also require mass production allows you to run more production jobs, so it is the equivalent of laboratory operation. So laboratory operation allows you to run more invention and copying and material efficiency and production efficiency research jobs. And then mass production, if someone wants to link that, will also allow more production jobs. So that's a basic overview of the skills. Okay, I'll come back more to the invention skills a little later, but that's about it. Okay, so for the production, certain modules, Tech-2 modules only require the science skills to level 1. If you are looking at rigs, they actually require the relevant rigging skill to level 1. So you have to have the skill required to equip the rig to be able to build the rig. Ammo requires science skill to higher levels, so if you're building small ammo, you need the science skills to level 2, level 3 for medium ammo, 4 for large ammo. And then ships will also require different skills, so they actually require frigate, cruiser, battleship, or capital construction to certain levels, depending on the ship class. The only type of ship that will require capital construction that is Tech-2 is actually the jump freighters, I believe. Though some of the Black Ops and Marauders may require capital ship skills. I haven't produced those, so I don't recall off the top of my head. You'd have to check the requirements. Okay, so that covers skills. So what else do we need to get started? Well, obviously we need somewhere to run our jobs. So, if you look in the main type of slot that is in the highest demand that we need, that is most crucial, is copy slots. So does everyone know how to look up available copy slots in known space? So who knows how to find their nearest available copy slot? Okay. So, okay, I'll cover that then. So what you need to do is you need to go to your Science and Industry tab in the Neocom, and then you have several tabs. So you have Jobs, Blueprints, Installations. So you want to go to Installations, and then you want to look at Activity, and then Copying. And so Installations, then Activity, Copying, and then you'll want to change your current range from current solar system to current region. And then you can look down and then see where the nearest available copy slot is. So I'm assuming you're all in HiSec, so where is the nearest available? Is there any, what is the soonest available slot on the copy slot? So 6 days, that's a fairly short one. If you look down, some of them will have, there'll be 19 days, 3 days, so it varies quite wildly. So if you're trying to do anything long term, if you are trying to invent in high-sec, it can be very difficult to get copy slots. Even low-sec sometimes can be very difficult. If you're lucky enough to be in null-sec, like Mr. Robert Patrol, then you'll be able to get a slot pretty quickly, and you may be able to run Tech-2 invention jobs just using the available NPC slots. But if you're in high-sec, then that can be very difficult. There's often not very many available slots. So when you're getting started, it can be okay to just start off making some copies in an NPC station. But long-term, if you want to get into Tech-2 manufacturing seriously, it's not very practical. So to get around that, there is what's known as player-owned stations. So, for player-owned stations, you can actually get mobile laboratories, and they actually have copy slots in them. So there are two main POS modules that have copy slots. Thank you, Faye. Cadalene Control Tower Small is a good starting POS. It's small, fairly cheap. Probably only run you about 100 million-isk a month in fuel. I actually did a lot of my invention and production in a Cadalene Control Tower Medium. There's actually another lab. There's actually, where is it? The experimental lab is not like the other labs, know that it has no copy slots, so that cannot be used for copying. There is also used to be a faction lab, but that seems to have, the higher soda lab, but that doesn't seem to be anywhere. Yes, thank you. That has no copy slots, that only has ME and PE and invention slots. So basically the modules you'd be looking at are the mobile laboratory and the advanced mobile laboratory. So the mobile laboratory has one copy slot, and that gives a 0.75 time bonus. And then the advanced mobile laboratory has 3 copy slots, and that gives a 0.65 time bonus. So usually it's good to have a mix of both mobile labs and advanced mobile labs. Since the mobile laboratory has 5 invention slots, so you can actually afford to run 10 invention jobs simultaneously. And the great thing is that if you look at the show info under the description for mobile laboratories, you actually get a time bonus for all the slots. So note that if you do a copy job at a mobile laboratory, it has a 0.75 job time bonus. So what that means is the job will complete 25% faster. So it only takes 75% of the time to complete. And especially for invention, you have a 0.5 job bonus. So when you get the Cadalene control tower medium, what do you do with it exactly? Excellent question. So what you do is you find an available moon, and then you can actually anchor it at the moon. And then you will need to fuel it. Using fuel blocks. So once you fuel it, it will then turn on, and then you will be able to actually use any modules. The Eve University used to have a POS in HiSec in Ulrich. Unfortunately, that got blown up a while ago. So yes, Faye gives a brief description. You fly 5 jumps from Trade Hub, find moon, anchor, fuel, anchor labs, and go. There's a few more complicating factors than just finding a moon. You need standings as well. So for high-sec passes, you need standings. If you are going to do, say, a low-sec pass, you do not need standings, but anyone can attack it. I'll cover a bit more later. But yeah, basically you fuel it. What would be the monthly operational cost of what would be the monthly cost of operating a pass? So basically the only cost is the fuel blocks. Once you have bought the tower and everything, it costs fuel blocks. So if you look in the description for Cadalene Control Tower Medium, under fuel requirements, you'll notice that it requires 20 fuel blocks per hour. Okay. And then you can produce those. There is the Cadalene fuel block blueprint. So if you do the show info, you'll see that it requires coolant, enriched uranium, heavy water, liquid ozone, mechanical parts, nitrogen isotopes, oxygen, and robotics. So not quite all PI stuff. So all but the heavy water, the liquid ozone, and the nitrogen isotopes are all actually ice products. So they're found from mining in ice belts, which they recently changed. So past fuel prices are probably going to be oscillating a little. And then, like Nax said, the rest is all PI stuff, so that's all obtained from doing PI. Okay, so it takes 20 of those blocks a month, and then the other thing, high-sec passes also require what's known as star-based charters. So star-based charters are obtained from LP stores. So they're fairly cheap, and I think I bought a year's worth, and maybe it was 10-20 million. So they add very little. So roughly how many alts can you keep busy with a small, medium, large control tower in high-sec with some defense? So yeah, Faye is very useful and gave fuel costs. So yeah, it's roughly about 120 million for small, and then the medium is so the small tower uses 10 fuel blocks an hour, the medium tower uses 20, and then the largest tower uses 40. So it doubles for each increase in size. So when you get up to the largest, it's about 450 million a month at the current prices, I think. That is, of course, subject to change as prices change. So how many alts can you keep busy with a small, medium, large control tower in high-sec with some defense? So what I found, you can probably keep about 1, maybe 2 alts. Probably about 1 alt busy with a small tower. Medium, I had about 2 production alts, and then large. Again, when you go up to the different sizes, you double the fitting. In high sec, there is no need for defense. The only time your tower can ever be in danger in high sec is if you get war decked. If you are not war decked, anyone who attacks your tower will get concorded. So attacking the tower without you don't really need defenses. Worst case, what you can do is you can always, if you get a war deck, you can strip down the pass. You obviously have 24 hours, as I'm sure all the Unisters know, once the war is declared, before it becomes active, and during that time you can disassemble and place it, just disassemble it and put it into a station. So that's one option, or the other option is you can just refit it if a war deck comes. So just take down all your laboratory modules and then just put a whole load of, say, ECM modules and hardness on, just to make it as annoying to take down as possible. So in high sec, you don't need to have defenses. How hard is it for war targets to find your pass? It's very easy if they know your character. If you have a character that you do production on and they know who that is, and you're logged in or you're logged out and you're in that system, it doesn't really... If you stay in that system all the time, then they can run locator agents on you and then find you that way and then find what system you're in, and then it's just a matter of looking at all the moons to see if to find your pass. So if there's a lot of moons in a particular system, then it can be a little bit time consuming, but difficulty wise, it's not difficult. It's just a matter of whether they want to commit to doing it. The Uni's pass was very easy to find because everyone knew where it was, and it was fairly well publicized. Okay, so pass. So, yes, so basically to get started, all you need, one thing you can do is to put up a pass, and then I actually have an example later in my slides, which is basically a bit more involved than that, but yeah, that's one thing you can do. That's small control tower and using pretty much all the CPU. I'm not a fan of manufacturing ammo. It's difficult to make profit on that alone, but I'll come back to that. Okay. So if someone wants to relink the slides for anyone joining late. Okay, so slide number 7, so let's look at a worked example of what is required to make an item all the way through. Okay, so let's... yes, you do need a tower to have labs. So, I'll come back to that a bit more. Bosozuku. Okay. So, suppose we wanted to manufacture a heavy ion blaster too. So suppose we're a Galente pilot and we fly around with, say, a Vexor or, good grief, I've forgotten the name, some Caldari cruiser. Caracals don't use blasters, but yes, a mower or something like that. So suppose heavy ion. Everyone uses heavy ion blasters in nullsec. So what is involved in actually producing one? So first, we need to get our copy. So we have to own a copy of the Heavy Ion Blaster 1 blueprint. So these types of module blueprints are fairly cheap. I don't remember the price off the top of my head. Someone in HiSec can probably look at the NPC seeded price. It's probably maybe at most 2 or 3 million, 900,000 ISK. Okay. So what you need to do is you need to get a hold of a copy of this blueprint, and then you need to make some copies. So when you make copies, the max runs that you can make per blueprint copy are 300. So when you're inventing blueprints, for modules, the number of copies makes a difference. The number of copies on the blueprint copy makes a difference as to the number of copies that you get on the outputted Tech-2 blueprint. So for a regular T1 module, what you want to do is you want to make the max number of runs for the copy. So in this case, it's 300 runs. And then when you're doing copies, you can make up to 20 copies at a time. Okay. So once you have your 300 run copy, you then want to invent it. So to do that, you need to just find an invention slot in HiSec. The invention slots are, as Americans would say, dime a dozen. I will answer that in a moment, Basuzuki. So you want to make sure that you have the skills, and then you look down at the bottom and it'll say extra materials. So you know that it requires some data cores. So what data cores does it require? It requires the same data cores as for the skills. So for Heavy Ion Blaster 2, it requires 2 data core mechanical engineering. So it requires 2 of those and 2 data core plasma physics. So those have to be in the same location as your blueprint copy. And then it also requires what's called an incognito data interface. So I'll come back more to the data interfaces, but there's a whole bunch of different ones. Thank you, Faye. Very useful today. When you do the invention, all the data cores that are involved will be consumed. The interface will not become consumed. That will, as is said in the description, can be used as often as needed. So you only need one of these. So these are usually found via, I think, mag or radar sites. I forget off the top of my head. But anyone who's done some exploration will probably be able to tell you. So this, along with the encryption, yeah, I think it's radar. So you'll usually get you'll get blueprint copies from the data sites, and then you are able to produce the data interfaces. So regular modules use data interfaces, and then there are 2 other types of interfaces. So there is the tuner data interface, which is used for rigs, and the incognito ship data interface, which is used for ships. And then each faction has a data interface. So incognito is the Cadalene data interface. Then you will have cryptic, which is Caldari. You have... Good grief, I've forgotten again. Yes, they're color-coded. You've got, cryptic. Yes, they're color-coded like ECM. So cryptic, you'll notice, is orange. That is Minmatar. The blue is the esoteric, which is the Caldari, and then the yellow is the occult, and then the aquacola is the Galente. But notice it says in the description, designed for use with Galente technology. The same also now applies to decryptors. So here, for example, as a decryptor, note that I do not know if it's color-coded, but it'll say Galente, and then it's the same naming scheme. So incognito is the Galente data interface, and it'll be the Galente decryptors. And then the decryptors are also found through exploration, so they're fairly rare, and their price varies somewhat. Okay, let me just get a drink. One moment. Yes, Chloe. Decryptors are optional. If you note in the description, they give they modify the results. So if you look, it'll have a probability modifier, which changes the probability of success. Max run modifier, which will change the number of runs on the resulting blueprint. Mineral efficiency and production efficiency will affect will change them from the default. So, for example, by default you have a -4, -4. So if you were to use the incognito accelerant for our invention job, the probability of success would increase by 20%. You would get yes, success is not guaranteed. I'll show you the formula later and do some worked examples. And then it gives you an extra max run. So by default, if you have a Tech-2 module that you're inventing, then if you have 300 copies, 300 runs on your blueprint copy, then it will give you an output of 10. If you use, say, the incognito accelerant, it will give you 10 plus 1, so it'll give you 11 output. And then note that it gives mineral efficiency modifier of +2 and production efficiency of +5. So by default we have -4, -4, so the result will be -2 plus 1 for the result. Okay. So you run your invention job. If you're running the invention job, you can look at the time it will take in the blueprint copy, in the original blueprint, if you do the show info on the blueprint original. And if you look, where is it again? If you look under attributes, it does not give invention, it gives you copy time. And then if you look at a blueprint copy, heavy ion blaster 1 blueprint copy, let me see if I can find one. I don't seem to be able to find one. But if you look at the blueprint copy, it will actually tell you the invention time. Like I said, I don't have a copy. So by default for modules, it is 2.5 hours for the heavy ion blaster. So it takes 2.5 hours to invent. If you use a POS module, then we have a 0.5 from the mobile laboratory. We have a 0.5 invention time bonus. So we have 0.5 job time bonus, so it will take half as long if you invent at a mobile lab rather than in HiSec. Yes, it does depend on the item that you're inventing. you have to look and take into account the amount that you would save by using the decryptor. For most modules, it is not worth it. So, for example, for our heavy ion blaster, if you look at the invention cost compared to the amount that you'll save, data cores, I forget how much data cores run for at the moment. Can someone look up the price of the 2 data cores? Does everyone know about Eve Central and Eve Market Data? Okay, so it's about 150 to 200k for data cores. Yes, you can. I think you can find some in radar sites. You can also get them from research agents, and then you can also get them from faction warfare. So yes, they come from a variety of different sources. So about 150 to 200k per data core. So if you look at the cost of the data cores, the invention job will typically run around 800,000 for a 10-run blueprint copy. So in order to save money using decryptors, it would have to either reduce the cost of the item using the production efficiency a sufficient amount in order to in order to make up the price of the decryptor, or give you enough extra runs to save you the invention cost. Research agents are worth having. They do give you money for no effort once you have set them up, but they are time consuming to grind up for. So yes, it is worth it. Yes, it will give you ISK. Are there better uses of your time? Possibly. I think the amount that you get from it is fairly small. In fact, if you look in eVisc per hour, has anyone downloaded it? If anyone's downloaded it, you can look under the data cores tab, and then it'll give you if you put in your skills, it can give you a rough estimate of how much ISK per hour, or how much ISK per hour it's worth. Like I said, it's not too much, but it's passive ISK. Well, the issue is you've got to train the skills up to 4, and then for the level 4 agents, and get the standings up sufficiently with the specific corp. But if you're grinding faction standings, you can run missions for that particular corp as part of that process. So yeah, you have to have like 5.0 standings. So you have Devol Labs for level 4 agents. So yeah, what you can do is just train one of the science skills up to level 4, and then you can set them up, and then you just have to, when you train up research project management, you can get extra agents for the Devol laboratories. Okay. So I actually gave a screenshot of a copy of my Tech-2 blueprint copy on page 8. So does it show you the... Yes. If you look under the blueprint copy, under the research tech time, I believe that is that's the invention time. So on page 8, under the research tech time, that's 2.5 hours. So it doesn't say it on the blueprint copy, blueprint original, but it does say it on the blueprint copy. One moment. Okay, so that is copying, and then note that I had a material level 20 with a wastage, which gave a wastage factor of 0.5, and then the productivity level doesn't matter. So if you look on page 9, you can see the result of my invention job. So we see that we have a material level -4, we have a productivity level -4, we have 10 licensed production runs remaining out of 100 maximum. So the maximum doesn't really matter. And then you'll note that it takes 5 hours, 33 minutes to manufacture. Now for the other part. So if you look on the right-hand side of slide number 9, we can see the materials required to build a Tech-2 item. So we note that it requires industry level 5, plasma physics level 1, quantum physics level 1, so it's pretty much the same skills as before, so you don't have to go about maxing more skills. So you see this was actually a show info from a non-production efficiency 5 character. So you can see that my skills are less than perfect that I was doing the show info on. I do have a perfect production efficiency character, but this show info wasn't done on it. So if you look at the materials, you see isogen, maxilon, morphite, noxium, pyrite, and tritanium. So everyone who has done any mining or Tech-1 production, those should all be familiar. If you look at the bottom under extra materials, it also requires one of the Tech-1 item. This is true for all modules and ships. That doesn't hold true for rigs. Rigs do not require the Tech-1 rig to make the Tech-2 rig. It also requires particle accelerator units, RAM, weapon tech, and robotics. So the robotics is from PI, as anyone from PI who's done PI will be able to tell you. It is a P3, so it's fairly high-level PI. It gets used for a lot of Tech-2 items. The RAM stands for, and if you look on page 10, I gave a summary, so the RAM is for stands for Robotic Assembly Modules. Yes. So, there's some complications with RAM. I will come to that in a moment. And if you look at the particle accelerator unit, that is produced from something called moon goo, is the informal name for it. So can someone link the blueprint for, yes, it's uses materials from moons like crystalline carbide, fullerenes, like in the Null-M blueprint and the RAM ammunition tech. So the RAMs actually only use regular Tech-1 minerals. One moment. So here's the particle accelerator unit, and then that is produced from the blueprint. Okay, so if you do a show info, and you look at the manufacturing, you see that it requires crystalline carbides, fullerenes, and hypersynaptic fibers. So these are all produced from low-sec and null-sec from mining in moons. The controversial topic, and I'm not going to get into too much of it, since for most people it's not really practical to get into, but needless to say you need these. Note that you also require certain skills at higher levels to be able to build them. To build the particle accelerator units, you need to have electronic engineering level 3, which you'll be able to see if you do a bill of materials and then manufacturing. So electronic engineering level 3. So again, these are affected by production efficiency, but you need fairly high skills to be able to research the material efficiency. in order to maximize profit. So note that it requires Metallurgy 5, which is fairly extensive train. I think it's about an X3, isn't it? Yes, it's an X3. So it requires a high level of that to do the research, material efficiency research. Okay, so that is produced from moon goo. So the moon goo we typically just have to buy off the market. It's not really practical to go out and harvest that ourselves. Okay. Chloe's question about the robotic assembly module. Yes, they are eventually destroyed. There's some complications in the implementation, though. Suppose you want to build. Suppose I have the blueprint copy given on page 9. So I have 10 production runs. So it actually requires, to be able to produce all of those in one go, it requires me to give 10 robotic assembly module weapon techs. So I actually have to have 10 present at the location at the time of manufacture. Then when I run the manufacturing job, it will damage them. But it doesn't apply the damage evenly to each one. What it does is it will apply all of the damage to one, and then if that one is destroyed, it will start on the next one. So if I'm doing 10, I don't recall. I might have tried it once or twice, but I don't recall if it can. No. Yes. So if I start with 10, and then I do the manufacturing, it will actually, it'll apply the full damage to the first one, and then it'll keep going. So what will actually happen is you'll end up with, it'll destroy, in this case, if I'm building 10, it will destroy 4 of them, and then it will leave me with one with 40% damage on it. And then I will have 5 undamaged RAM weapon techs. So if you're producing guns and things like that, you tend to go through these fairly quickly, but they're fairly cheap. I used to build my own, but that's not necessary. I don't know if the supplies are sufficient, how good the supplies are in, say, Jita. If they come in sufficient quantities, they're fairly cheap to build, and you don't save a great deal by building them, but I think the supplies are usually fairly limited. Okay, so the particle accelerator units you can usually either build yourself or you can buy as. The three of the items you can either build or buy. Obviously, the isogen, the mexilon, the morphite, the noxium, the pyrite, and the tritanium, you would either buy from the market, or you would build yourself. Or you would mine yourself, not build. Then the remaining 3 items, apart from the robotics you can either produce using PI yourself, or you can just buy off the market. However, for the heavy neutron blaster, for the particle accelerator unit, and the RAM weapon tech, there's actually a little bit more of a complication, because you have more options. You can either build the module yourself or just buy it from the market. So you have to look, is it worth it to build or to buy? And I'll come back to that a little bit later. So here is, on page 11, is a screenshot from EVIS per hour. So like I said, it's very useful. You can just you can look at a particular item, and then it can give you a cost estimate, and then obviously it's not exact because the invention chance is random. Know that it calculates the invention chance for you, and it'll give you an approximate invention cost for a particular number of runs. And it'll tell you the materials required. And then you can use it to create a shopping list, and then give you a list of stuff to buy. It'll also calculate what's called the raw ISK per hour. So how much ISK am I producing per hour of manufacturing time? So that is an extremely important number. So if you look on slide 12, I give an example of why it's important. So why is it important how much we make per hour manufacturing something? So obviously, for me, producing stuff wasn't my main idea of fun. It was just my idea of how to make ISK. So I want to play the game besides producing stuff. So obviously I'm going to want to have, say, a second character. But I want that second character to pay for itself. I don't, if I'm producing, say, 400 million of stuff and it costs me 550 million under current Plex prices to keep my account active every month, then that is obviously not worth it. I'm losing ISK for having that account. So I want to see what is the break even. How much do I have to make to be able to pay for that account? So here's a basic example. So suppose we had a single character doing the invention. And suppose I've trained it extensively, so now it can produce 10 items simultaneously. So then I have one Plex which I have to pay for, and then I also have to pay for my POS. So how much does my POS cost me? So obviously I just need to, I can work out the fuel costs, and then it comes to, for say, a medium POS, about 215 million an hour. Per month. If you wanted to, say, do a small POS, then obviously the cost of POS fuel would be cheaper, but then the cost of the Plex is still going to be the same. One way of cutting costs as well would be to train multiple characters. Just given a basic skill training plan to get into T2 manufacturing, though, takes about 50 days. So that's for a bare bones, very basic manufacturing. So obviously, when you're just starting out, that's going to take some time to set up. So you want it to be profitable. You want that account to be profitable while you're setting up those multiple characters on the same account for the production. So looking at your startup costs, looking at the costs initially, I haven't done any calculations of startup costs. It's fairly simple. If you do, say, a buddy account, typically it takes about one Plex. You can start a buddy account with 21 days and then activate a Plex, and that gives you 51 days. That's roughly enough to get going, and then you would need a second Plex, and that second Plex would is enough to usually get you started on being productive, and then you are able to Plex from then on. It's difficult, but it is doable if you do that. But that's startup costs there. They're different. I can go through and give a rough estimate of startup costs after. I don't have a slide for it, though, at the moment. Okay. So, if we look at a character with, say, 10 manufacturing slots, and in order to pay for the account and for the POS, I need to be making a certain amount of ISK per hour over the course of the month. So, there are 720 hours in the month. Well, I'm assuming the length of a Plex, which is 30 days, not the length of a month. So I'm using that to base my calculations. So we can multiply 24 by 30, which gives us 720. If we divide 765 hours by 765 million by 720 hours, it shows that we need to be making about 1.06 million ISK per hour on the character as a whole to pay for that one particular account. So if we divide that by slot, we need to be making about 100,000 ISK per hour per slot. So now we see why EVISK per hour is so useful, because it gives us roughly a rough estimate of the raw ISK per hour for manufacturing. So manufacturing tends to be one of the main bottlenecks for Tech-2 production. You can only produce so fast. So if we look at our heavy ion blaster, what do we notice? If we were making nothing but heavy ion blasters, could we afford an account just on that? I'm asking for participation. So just compare the number. So we look, just if we're doing nothing but producing Tech-2 heavy neutron blasters. So yeah, that's different from the heavy ion blaster that I provided. We would make about 103,000 per hour. But we need about 106,000. So it's below the amount that we need. So typically I like to aim this total affects what you want to build. If I am producing something like this, then I am effectively losing it. If I produce nothing but that, I would effectively be losing ISK. I wouldn't be gaining any ISK. Obviously, the point of my Tech-2 manufacturing character is to have more ISK come in than is required to pay for the character. So, yes, it is short. So then, that's one factor we need to take into consideration. Obviously, we can usually find some items that have really nice ISK per hour. So one of the great things about EVISK per hour, it can actually look through if you give it the current JITA prices, it can actually go through and calculate items and then see what's worth building. So give it a minute. To calculate. Those numbers are based on sell orders. So I'm buying materials from sell orders and then selling as a sell order. So obviously, yes, you have lots of market PvP. So if you wanted to, say, move the items very quickly and just stick them up as sell them to buy orders, it would be even worse. I tend to use the worst case for buying materials and then the best case for selling materials. Obviously, that probably gives me an over-optimistic estimate of my profit margin, but usually it tends to be fairly close. So maybe, say, if we look at the current, so if you look at, say, the scan pinpointing array, it's a brand new module, so right now the profit margin on that is crazy big. And there's a lot of high demand. But obviously that's going to drop off over time. So right now you can get about 17 million ISK per hour producing the new scanning modules. But obviously that's going to drop off sharply as the supply starts to meet the demand. So modules tend to have fairly middling ISK per hour. They're usually fairly easy to get into. The cost of the blueprints is fairly low. It's just then a matter of paying for the character and for the pass. Okay, Chloe's question: if I just make as much ISK with manufacturing to pay for the character, do not we lose the effort we invested in manufacturing? Because if we just get as much ISK as we invest in the Plex fuel, where is the gain? That's exactly my point. You're not gaining anything. But you want to know, what is your break-even point? What is the point at which it starts becoming profitable? Yeah. Yeah, you do get skill points as well, but again, I want the character to pay for itself. If your goal is just to have some sustainable way of keeping the account while you're training something else you want to do, then that's an alternative. But yeah, why settle for treading water when you can swim? Okay. So breaking down based on types, ammo tends to be the pretty low ISK per hour. Ammo tends to be below that replacement point. The main way of making stuff like ammo pay for itself is you have to have multiple characters on the same account producing. So if you have, say, 3 characters on one account producing, then obviously you're going to reduce. Then you have, instead of 10 slots, you have 30 slots. So the amount of ISK per hour is cut in a third. By the amount of ISK per hour that you need to pay for the account is cut by 1/3. So say I only need to make 180 per character per month. So that is one way of doing it. There are certain advantages to ammo over, say, modules or something like that. Ammo has very long production times and very short invention times, so it's very easy to invent at saturation. Some of the smaller modules tend to have short invention time, but they tend to have short production time and then short invention time. But they you have to be inventing several times a day to be able to keep up with the production. But the ISK per hour on those kinds of things tends to be higher because the more effort required to actually keep up with an item tends to affect how profitable that item is. So if you have to be doing lots of jobs constantly, you'll find that not so many people want to do that, so the competition in that particular marketplace is fairly low. Whereas for ammo, like I said, it's very easy because you can just invent. You only need to run invention jobs, like 2 invention jobs every 3 days. So it's very easy to keep up with that. And then you only need to reset production every 3 days, so about twice a week. So the effort is very low. But consequently, the profit margin is pretty low as well. But like I said, you can accommodate that by having multiple characters. Obviously, that increases the initial skill point investment time, so it can take a while. So one option is, of course, to start off with something that is more involved, and then you can transition to something that is less involved. Ships, on the other hand, ships and rigs, on the other hand, are fairly difficult to keep going because they have fairly long invention times and fairly short production times. So it can be very difficult. Okay, so back to build versus buy. Yes, but then it's going to shorten the time, but then the investment cost is going to be roughly the same. because once you've finished training that character and switch to the other character, you're then plexing that second character. With the dual character training, it would reduce the amount of time that it requires you to become profitable. So that's a good point, Andrus. It wasn't available when I started doing Tech-2 manufacturing, so it wasn't consideration for me. I could only train one character on an account at a time, so it was a case of doing the 50 days and then switching to another character and then doing the 50 days. Or setting up a second account, a third account on top of that. Okay, build versus buy. So back to the question of when is it worth it to build the modules versus build the intermediate components versus the buying them off the market. So what are the factors that you need to take into account? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Magnum. The point is that your overheads will be perplexed account for all intents and purposes. Dual character training is basically having two accounts. But then once you have invested in sufficient in the account, then you don't have to pay from it from that point on. So it's a little bit better. It's like having a free transfer account now. Okay, so suppose. So everyone who has been to the Manufacturing 101 class has had this point raised. So what does it mean for the opportunity cost of something? So suppose we've been mining, and then the good old minerals that I've mined myself are free. Obviously, I know that not free. I have to take into account the time. So if I can, when I'm building the T2 items, do I produce from the intermediate? Do I produce the components, or do I just buy the components? So pretty much it's always cheaper to buy and build the components myself. No one ever sells components at a loss unless mineral prices shift drastically, and then sometimes you'll be able to buy items at cheaper than it costs to manufacture them. So that's only in a rare occasion will that be true. So typically, no one wants to sell their stuff at a loss, so it's going to cost so much to build them. So I'm going to save so much in building them over buying them. So suppose I save 50,000 ISK, and it costs 1 hour to make the component, but I can usually make 100,000 ISK per hour. Is it then worth it to make that component? No, because I'm losing that 50,000 ISK by producing that component. I could be making 100,000 ISK per hour on that slot, on that manufacturing slot, if I wasn't making that thing. So when you are building something, that is one thing you have to take into account. For modules, it's usually very small amounts of stuff, and it can depend somewhat heavily on the module, and there's lots of complicating factors like how highly have I researched the manufacturing efficiency and production efficiency. So you have to do that calculation yourself based on what you want to do, but that is something you need to take into account. If it's cheaper to buy, if by buying the component I can produce something for more than I would be saving, then it's obviously worth just buying the component. Though sometimes there is a limited supply, so like I said, the RAM weapon techs, I can blow through hundreds of those in a month, and JITA supply can be sometimes fairly limited. So often it's a lot better to buy them to build them myself. Okay, and then back to the question from a while ago. We had an invention. Now we have the invention success formula. So we have the invention chance is equal to B times 1 plus 0.01 times E times 1 plus D1 plus D2 times 0.1 divided by 5 minus ML times the decryptor modifier with appropriate parentheses. So B is the base chance. So the base chance is based on what you are inventing. Sorry. So for most modules, this would be 40%. I'm a mathematician. I have a bachelor's degree in mathematics, and I'm working on a PhD in statistics, so I have to include at least one formula in all presentations I do. It's mandatory. Otherwise, I will have my bachelor's degree revoked. Okay, so note that the encryption skill level and the data core skill levels are, yes. I give you the percentages. So note that the encryption skill level and the data core skill level are included separately. So so the encryption tends to have a fairly small, a smaller effect than the data core. We also have the meta level of any items included. So if you include a meta item, then it will increase the invention chance success, but often that's not worth it. It depends on whether by using that you increase the invention chance success enough to decrease the invention cost below the cost of the meta module that you. If the meta module is cheaper than the amount that you would get. Yeah, the Gunnery 101, 102 is much nastier. And I give you a nice simple chart. So if you typically you'll either have all ones, which is the minimum skill level you can invent with. So 40% is modules, and then frigates 40%, I forget. No, frigates are 30%. So 40% tends to be modules and rigs. So if we look at the minimum we can have is a 42% chance, and then that goes up to a maximum of 50% without using a decryptor. So obviously, if you increase the skill level, then it will decrease the invention costs. If I want to get, say, 10 output runs, it will decrease the number of invention jobs I have to run. Roughly, the expected number of successful inventions will be the number. Say you're running 20 invention jobs, which would be a single copy run. Then you multiply the number of copy runs by the invention chance success, and that gives you the expected number of successes. So the expected number of outputted blueprints. And then I can go into my statistics mode and say that will be a binomial random variable with, and you can calculate and get bounds on the number of invention successes if you want. If someone wants to learn more about that, I can talk about that after, but I'm not going to put everyone through that. I think that might be overloading the mathematics. Okay. So, roughly speaking, the levels that you'd want to get it are, initially, obviously, you want the all ones to be able to invent it. Typically, all threes is kind of the sweet spot if you're trying to invent a lot of different stuff. Then getting all the skills to three is fairly low commitment. It only takes a few hours per skill. There are times 5 skills, but all threes doesn't take that long, maybe a day per 3 skills. And then all fours takes quite a bit of a time investment. You're looking at about, I forget how many days a skill. I think it's 4 days and something a skill. And then you can also look at, suppose you wanted 10 invention jobs. If you want 10 outputted invention jobs, if you do 10 divided by the probability of success, that'll give you roughly how many invention jobs you have to do. Obviously, it's fairly close to 50% for modules, so you can see roughly how many invention jobs per 10 you have to be doing. Obviously, it falls fairly close to 2 invention jobs per 1 manufacturing job that you want to run. Okay. So 40% is modules, and then 30%, modules and rigs, and then 30% is roughly frigates. 25, I think, is cruisers, and then 20 is battleships and jump freighters. So fairly sizable ships. So we see as we get to the lower end, to the higher tier items, the invention success goes down fairly rapidly. So that's where decryptors come in. So decryptors can also modify the invention success chance. So for most modules, it's not really worth using decryptors. You have to take into account the mathematics is slightly complicated because there's 2 factors basically you have to take into account to see if it's worth using a decryptor. You have to take into account the change in success chance. So if you have a really expensive invention job, then just increasing the success chance is obviously going to save you a lot of ISK. Say, suppose you're inventing jump freighters. The amount of ISK involved to invent a jump freighter is fairly substantial. So suppose you put in an attainment decryptor, you're going to nearly double the chance of success. So you're going to take it from, say, at all fours, 24.13 to near 40 something percent. So that's obviously a significant increase. And if say your invention costs are 100 million ISK, then you have to run per success. You have nearly half the number of runs that. You have a lot less runs to get an outputted blueprint. And then the other factor you have to take into account is the outputted material efficiency level. So if you look at, say, the process decryptor, so remember this will be, say, an incognito process decryptor. That gives you a much higher material efficiency. So if you are building something something very large like a jump freighter, using a process decryptor is going to give you a much higher material efficiency. So recall that the base for a -4 is -50%, and I don't recall what material level of -1 gives you. But it does reduce the material costs quite considerably. But obviously, again, you have to do the calculations and see whether it's worthwhile for your particular invention job, and see which one of the decryptors is best. Okay, and then I have my cheat sheet. So Amar is occult, Caldari is esoteric, Galente is incognito, and Mimitar is cryptic. So this refers to the decryptors and to the data interfaces as well. Okay, so we have about 20 minutes left, and I still have quite a few slides, so I meant to keep this under 2 hours, but it looks like I'll be going somewhat past 2 hours. Okay. So, manufacturing production lines part 1A, module invention. So suppose I have my heavy neutron blasters. And yes, I know they're below our profitability threshold that we would like, but they serve as a nice worked example. So we look at a heavy neutron blaster 2. So if we go back to slide number 9, number 9, it says to produce one, it takes 5 hours and 33 minutes. So I'm assuming that we're producing it in a pass. If we look at the equipment assembly array, that gives us a 75% production time. That gives us 75% production time. So, that's the blueprint. There's the item. So it gives us a 75% production time, and then it gives us 6 manufacturing slots. There's also something called the rapid equipment assembly array. If you click at this and look at the info, this gives you a much lower base time multiplier, but note it increases the base material multiplier, so it's almost never worth using. Typically you want to use either the equipment assembly array or assemble in a station. Obviously, if you assemble in a station, you get the base manufacturing time. Otherwise, you have the base time multiplier of 0.75 if you're producing in an equipment assembly array. Okay. So that's where I'm getting that number from. So if I'm building 10, which is the maximum for a Tech-2 blueprint copy, that takes 1 day, 9 hours, 20 minutes. So obviously I want to be constantly running production lines. I want to be constantly producing something. I always want to be producing something, because if I'm not producing something, I'm not making money. Okay. So for every production job, we need to run 1 divided by the invention success rate, invention jobs. So for every production job, I am recording it, yes. I will be placing the recording up once it's turned into MP3. Okay, so it takes 1 divided by the invention success rate, invention jobs. Okay. So if my build job takes 1 day, 9 hours, and 20 minutes, and my invention success is exactly 50%, then I have to make sure that I run at least approximately 2 invention jobs every 1 day, 9 hours, 20 minutes, to be able to sustainably keep my production line running. So obviously for something like this, that would be fairly easy. You log in once in the morning, you log in once in the evening, or you just log in, start an invention job, play for an hour and 15 minutes if you're building in a pass, and then you run an invention. Then once you get to the end of that invention job, you set a new invention job after that initial one has finished. So that's pretty easy to do twice a day. The problem is, our heavy neutron blaster 2 isn't profitable enough for our needs. So we have to look at different modules. So obviously, if we look at, say, a light neutron blaster, if we look at, say, a light electron blaster. And if we're producing 10 of those, producing 10 light electron blasters in our equipment assembly array takes roughly 13 hours and 45 minutes. So then how many invention jobs do we have to run to be able to sustain our production line? So obviously we have to take our production job 1, and we'd be running approximately 10 of these. And then we divide that by invention success. So suppose we have nice skills and we have an invention success of 50%. Then we have to be running 2 invention jobs every 13 hours to give us roughly enough blueprint copies to keep our production lines running. But that's every 13 hours and 45 minutes. So then, how many invention jobs is that a day? That's 3 and nearly 4 invention jobs a day that we have to be running. And depending on your playtime, that may not be very possible. You either have to be online in one go for, say, close to 5 hours. And if you're a casual player, that might not be doable. So these are the things you have to think about when you're designing your setup. So random comparison for effort per day. So I cannot use the labs like PI, as in PI I can accept lower output for a much lower time investment. PI can be done with clicking every few days. Invention needs clicking a few times per day. It can be, but it depends on the item you're manufacturing. If I go back to the ammo example, if I'm producing, say, ten runs of Hail S, that has a production time of 2 days, 20 hours, and 32 minutes. The invention time is pretty short. So I have a very long production time and a very short invention time. So you have to control it by what I build, rather than by you can't say pick a particular item and say I want to produce light electron blasters at a slower rate. So can it be done with a lower number of clicks per day? It doesn't work like that. You have to look at the different production times and things like that. Like I said, that's why ammo is so popular. It's very easy to do that because it has that very long production time and that very short invention time. Whereas modules have that short invention time and short production time. So the longer the production time, the more people tend to do it. Rigs and ships, though, are an exception because they're a different mechanic because their invention time is longer than their production time. So to keep a sustainable ship production, it's not really doable. Except if you're using, say, some of the decryptors that give you very long runs. Say if you have a very large number of runs. So that, say, if you're using the augmentation, the optimized augmentation, which seems to be about the best now, that gives you an extra 7 runs. So if you're producing, say, a Tech-2 cruiser, the production time can you get a lot of runs out, so it reduces the invention time. It reduces the invention time and increases the production time. So that might be able to give you something profitable, though I haven't run the numbers to see if something like that would work. Okay. So ship invention. So what does it take to keep T2 ship production going? So frigates, if we're inventing at our POS module, our mobile laboratory, it takes 12.5 hours per copy. However, just to produce the ship, not producing any of the subcomponents, subcomponents, it takes 10 hours. So what is the issue with this? What is the invention success rate? The invention success rate is, say for frigates, about 30-something%. So you're going to fail roughly a third of your jobs. So in order to keep production going constantly on ships, on frigates, so in order to keep invention going on frigates, you would have to invent roughly 3 frigate blueprints per blueprint that I'm producing. So obviously that's going to take about 36 hours to produce 10 blueprints. And then once I produce those 10 blueprints, it only takes 10 hours to build the ships. So obviously ships are very difficult to keep producing. Though what I like to do is, suppose I'm producing ammo and I have a very long production run. Then I can, say, take a frigate blueprint and then invent that overnight. And then I have a very long invention job, and then it's just nice bonuses per hour, because the ships tend to have a better. When they sell in one big chunk, whereas for modules they tend to have short production time, so I have to sell a lot of them to make the same amount of money as selling one ship. Though the margins are different. And then the problem is the same with the cruiser. Also note that invented ship blueprint copies only have one copy. They don't work like the module blueprint copies, where you get a multi-run blueprint copy when you do the invention. When you do a ship invention, you only get one blueprint copy. Plus any extras for the decryption, based on the decryptor. So if I used an augmentation decryptor, I'd get +9, and then that would give me extra blueprint copies. Like I said, if you're looking at cruisers, say, if I don't know what the current price for the optimized augmentation is, but say, basically you can reduce the invention time by 1/8 for the production to produce one ship. So I can invent for 8 ships in the time that I could only invent for 1, and then it doesn't affect the success chance that much. So depending on the ship, it could be worth doing. Frigates, it tends not to be worth doing because the invention cost is fairly low, and then the profit margin is fairly low. Is not enough to make up the cost. Given that invention slots are so plentiful while copy slots are so rare and busy in high-sec, would one be better off loading their POS with advanced mobile labs as opposed to plain mobile labs, or do you wind up wanting the PE slots as well? That invention time success is very nice if, say you're online all day on a Saturday and you want to blow through a whole bunch of invention jobs because you have time, and you want to get a whole lot ready for when you don't have time during the week. You can keep on doing invention jobs every hour and 15 minutes, say, for modules. Plus for the ships and stuff like that, it's very nice to have that much quicker invention. The PE slots are often quite nice. They're a nice bonus. PE is not necessary, but any cost-saving measure is always nice. Like I said, it's not necessary, but I like to do it. I like to do it that way because it just gives me that extra flexibility, and I can get through the invention jobs a lot quicker when I'm actually online. And then rig. Again, rig production has the similar problem with the Ship production, the invention time is much longer than the production time, but the difference between rig production and ship production tends to be that the margin is pretty high on rigs, especially if you know what to produce. Certain Tech-2 rigs don't sell very well, but certain Tech-2 rigs are very worth building. You can make a good chunk of ISK in one go, but it tends to be rigs tend to be the opposite of modules. With modules, you want to be always producing something. With rigs, that's not as necessary because the profit margin is so much higher. Suppose I look at, say, a medium Trimark armor pump, though that's a very popular rig. It can be worth it, even if you're not producing constantly. Okay. So again, when you're looking at prices, you have to bear in mind how long does it take you to produce the items. So suppose I look at an item and I see the supply has run out on a particular module. This happens sometimes. Tech-2 module prices tend to be very cyclical. Sometimes people will overproduce and then the module price will drop, and then sometimes not enough people are producing it because the profit margin has dipped, so people will start producing the item. So you have to bear in mind as well the length of time that it takes to produce everything. So if I'm producing copies, then it takes a certain amount of time to produce my copies. I constantly have to be thinking at least 4 days in advance of what I want to be building. If I see a price is starting to drop, I don't want to be then producing that module once the price is dropping, because eventually it's going to go less than my production costs, and then, not my production costs, less than the amount of profit that I need to make. And it can take, then I'm stuck with that module for a while if I want to try and make enough ISK to pay my bills, as it were. So you have to constantly be taking these kinds of things into account. So, like I said, copying for modules, it tends to be longer because you want to do max run blueprint copies. For rigs and for ships, I only want to do one run copies, so they tend to be very quick. Producing a ship from zero, it takes about a day to make 20 copies for a frigate, and then about 12 hours to invent one lot, which will give me about 3 or 4 blueprints, and then the second lot will give me about another 3 or 4. So I'll tend to get like 7 or 8. You'll tend to get 7 or 8 from the output, and then so that tends to be about 2 day cycle, and then you've got to build it, which takes about another 12 hours. So I like to think roughly a week ahead, so I can buy in bulk what I need and then have it shipped from Jita. I tend to use I used Red Frog a lot and things like that to ship from Jita to my production pass, and then moving the materials around after that. Moving the produced modules around after that tends to be fairly small volume, so it's pretty simple to do. As I said, the production varies per module, so Copying is never really a problem, because a bit of advice on what I tended to do was I'd have a character that would do nothing but copy. To train a character that does nothing but copy, you only need 2 skills. You need laboratory operation and you need advanced laboratory operation. And you train laboratory operation and advanced laboratory operation to about... You train laboratory operation 5 and then advanced laboratory operation to about 3, and that gives you 9 copy slots, which is more than you have copy slots on, say, 2 mobile labs and 2 advanced labs. So that tends to be enough. And then, like I said, every 3 days you're producing about 2,300 run blueprint copies per slot, and you have, using my past setup, I had 8 slots, so I'd produce 8 lots of stuff every 3 days. And even at a 12-hour production time, it's easy. You end up with lots of copies sitting around doing nothing. So that tends not to be your bottleneck. The 2 main bottlenecks are your production and your invention. Production is obviously the main bottleneck. That's where most of the time is spent. Invention is very short. Production is very short cycles. The bottleneck is the number of clicks. You have to keep inventing, and unfortunately, because you have 10 invention jobs and then you'll get 5 blueprints, you have to run 2 invention jobs for every production run, roughly. Okay. So what to build? So the main question is, what ammo, modules, ships, and rigs do people use? So obviously this is the question. Now we know how everything is built, but what do we want to produce? So when it comes to ammo, you tend to want to produce the ammo that you first want to look at. Who is the main user of ammunition? So who are some of the main users of ammunition? Exactly. Mission runners will use the most ammo. PvPers tend to use very little ammo. I mean, if you're going in and you're going to die, you don't want to have a hold full of ammo. PvP tends to be very short, frenetic, so it doesn't use that much ammo, apart from past grinds. But you tend to avoid using expensive ammo for past grinds. You want to use cheap ammo. So mission runners tend to be your main market if you're producing ammo. Modules. Who do you think uses more modules, mission runners or PvPers? Exactly. If I'm a mission runner and I'm losing modules, I am doing things badly. I don't want to. I don't want to be losing ships all over the place. But if I'm a PvPer, then I tend to lose ships and therefore modules at a much faster rate. So ammo you want to tend to aim more for the mission runners, and then modules, ships, and rigs you want to aim for the PvPers. Rigs you can make a little bit of money, I think, off PvE rigs, but the volume doesn't tend to be as high as for the PvP rigs. So PvP rigs, like some of the good PvP rigs are the weapons rigs. They tend to be fairly cheap, and they add a good bit over the non-rigs, so that they can be fairly nice. Ships, obviously, whichever ships the PvPers and the PV and the mission runners tend to use. Mission runners tend to buy one ship and then use it, but they'll burn through ammo. So again, mission running ships can be hard to shift sometimes. So how do you find out what ships, modules, and rigs are popular for PvPers? Where do I want to do my research in that regard? Exactly, kill boards, see what's dropped. Looking at the large nullsec alliances and seeing what their doctrine fits are. Drakes have been popular for forever, and they were a doctrine ship for a long time. So if you look at, say, heavy missile launchers, they tend to be very popular, so the margin on those tends to be fairly small, so sometimes you have to think out of the box a little. Resist modules tend to be, a lot of people produce those. You have to kind of think outside the box a little to see what kind of stuff is worth producing. Yes, you do want to see what... You definitely do want to see what didn't drop, but obviously over time, 50% of all stuff will drop, and then if you're looking at big numbers, yeah. So if you can data mine kill boards, that's a great way of getting information and things like that. Okay. So that's kind of how you make your decision. You want to look at what do people use. If I find a great module that's got a really good profit margin but no one uses it, then it can be very difficult to shift them. Suppose I look at a Tech-2 survey scanner. Who do you think uses Tech-2 survey scanners? And the answer is probably almost no one. Miners are probably going to stick to Tech-1 survey scanners because they're cheap and they're almost as good. No, Magnum, I don't. Wormholers don't mine. Well, yes, people use them for gas clouds. So maybe the odd wormholer like Magnum who likes to use them for gas clouds. Magnum and Great Below are my core mates. Great Below will be giving quite a few classes, I think, tomorrow. And Magnum, are you giving any classes? Okay. Okay. So yeah, they tend to be fairly low value. Okay. So now we know what to build. Well, now we know how to figure out what to build. So where do we put a pass? So there's basically three main places you can put a pass. You could put a pass in low sec. If the security is 0.3 or lower, you can actually do what's called reactions. So you can take the moon goo. So moon goo comes in a raw form, and then you have to combine it to give better stuff. And then you can react that, and that you can do in low sec. Disadvantages, I'd say low sec is probably about the most dangerous option. You're very vulnerable to carriers. Not carriers, dreadnoughts. It's very easy to get a dreadnought to come and siege your pass if someone decides to. Unfortunately, yes, Ion, you did miss the part about blueprint copies, but I can answer questions after that, and I'm almost finished. Okay, so another option is low-class wormhole. So something like a C1, C2, C3, they have what's called a high-sec static, which means that they always have a hole that leads to somewhere in high-sec. So they tend to be fairly popular for industrial stuff, because you can just produce stuff. You can just produce stuff and then haul it in and out through your wormhole. C2 and C3 are better because you can. They allow larger ships through, but that can also be a disadvantage. Again, you still need to fit defenses. If someone randomly finds your POS in your wormhole, and they see that you have all these shiny POS modules, then they may want to decide to siege it. So you still want to have defenses. And then the last option that most people would want to consider is high security space. So the advantage is it's completely safe, apart from if you have a war deck going. Then you need to either pack up your POS or take down all your expensive modules and refit it for defensive. The disadvantage is this requires high faction standings. The faction standings are with the faction, so either, say, the Galente Federation, the Minmatar Republic, the Amar Empire, or the Caldari, I forget what the government name is. So it's not with a corp, so it's with the actual faction. So obviously that takes a lot longer to grind. So it has to be, so to put up a POS, it is based on your corporation's faction standing. So the corporation has to have the relevant standings to be able to put up the POS. So for high-sec, there are three types of systems you can put up a POS in. You can put up a POS in 0.5, 0.6, or 0.7. So for 0.5, you need to have 5.0 faction standing, and bear in mind it is your corp's faction standing. So that is based on the average of all people who have any kind of standing for that faction in your corp. So if you have one person who has some faction standing and you have another person who has no standings whatsoever with anything, they have never talked to an agent, then they don't count. The person who has no standings doesn't count. It's only based on the average of the people who have standings. And it's based on their standings without the skills in effect. So if you have, say, 4.37 and with skills it's 5 point something, that isn't enough. You need to grind up to 5.0 at the minimum. So obviously that takes time. In terms of skills, in terms of safety, I'd recommend a high-sec POS or a low-class wormhole. I've not had any experience personally with low-sec. I mean, it's going to depend on if someone doesn't like how you look. They may just decide to siege it with dreadnoughts. In a low-class wormhole, that tends to be a little bit less of a problem because they have to bring in those battleships and then start sieging it. Again, you may want to put up a large tower and have some defenses, and then you can do other stuff in the wormholes as well. You can do the reactions. You can also put up your own carrier if you are appropriately skilled. And then finally, I have my sample high-sec POS setup. So this is the POS that I used to have in high-sec. So basically, you have a Caldari control tower medium, and then two mobile labs, two advanced mobile labs, two equipment assembly arrays. If you're running with two characters, you can add a third equipment assembly array, and then component assembly array is for building any components, and then if you want to produce ammo, you can add an ammo assembly array. As you can see, you have a lot of power grid left over, and assembly modules tend to use a lot of power grid. and not much CPU. Questioning in small co-op 6 to 7 people, only 3 have decent faction standing. Can you reset the co-op faction standing by kicking the low standing out and inviting back, or do they have to stay out for a week? For corporation standing, there are 2 basic things. When you kick someone out, the standings will recalculate without them after it's usually less than a day. So when someone has been kicked, when they've been out for roughly a day, the standings will recalculate based on the average of the people who are in corp. The other factor is you have to be in corp for at least 1 week before your standings count. So if you kick someone and then bring them back into the corp, their standings won't count towards the average for 1 week after they come back into the corp. So yes, once you have the standings, you want to quick put up the tower, and then after, then you can bring the people back in. Like I said, it takes. I think it's usually up to a number of hours. Certainly less than 24, so you kick everyone, wait 24 hours, and then you can put up the tower. Or you can re-invite them, put up the tower, and so on. It's usually not a problem. Okay, so we have finished. A little bit longer than I thought. So, as I said, I can only tell you what worked for me. There's a lot of variables to take into account. Your playtime, how often you can get onto event. So you have to find a schedule that works for you. You have to find that the items and modules that you feel comfortable with that are good money for you. Another thing I've learned is you have to constantly be reevaluating what you're building. It's not enough just to say build 2 or 3 modules constantly. They can fluctuate a lot. Sometimes more people will start building them, which can bring the profit down a lot. And then you want to keep looking for that extra opportunity, that extra bit of money. But it's interesting, and there's a lot of there's a lot of skill required, and not so much in the formulating everything, but finding what is good and predicting what the market is going to do. That's not something I can teach. That's something you have to learn and figure out for yourself, unfortunately. But like I said, there's good money in it, but it does take effort. So, any questions? So, thank you for all for hosting me. It's been a pleasure. I'm going to stop the recording now, and then I can answer any questions that we have left. Thank you.